Hey guys, so today's video is a request from Trash Can the Wonder Dog, so thank you for that. Your name cracks me up. Today is a video about two killers, one who had a connection to Zack and Addie, who were the subject of one of my other videos. Zack having killed and dismembered Addie's body in New Orleans shortly after Katrina. So I'll go over this murder and the connection between the people as well. So the victim in the story is a woman by the name of Jaren Lockhart. She was 23 years old at the time of her death and had a 3-year-old daughter, but did not have custody of the child at the time. She lived with her fiance at the Capri Motel in New Orleans, and she worked as an exotic dancer in the Temptations strip club in the French Quarter. Late in the afternoon of Thursday, June the 7th, 2012, some workers who were pumping sand onto the beach at Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, discovered a female torso that had washed up from the Gulf of Mexico. Early Saturday, June 9th, 2012, a fisherman on the beach at Pass Christian came across the lower portion of a human leg. Later that day, searchers in Long Beach, Mississippi, found a female head that had washed ashore. The body parts had come from Jaren Lockhart, who had been stabbed in the chest, which was her presumed cause of death. The investigators with the Hancock County Sheriff's Office in Mississippi didn't know where the victim had been murdered or when. After they discovered who she was and where she worked and where she was last seen, a review of the Temptations strip club surveillance tapes showed Lockhart on the night of June 5th, 2012, walking along Bourbon Street and into the club accompanied by two people, identified as 28-year-old Margaret Sanchez and Sanchez's boyfriend, Terry Speaks, who was 39. Now, Speaks worked as a doorman at this strip club, and he often walked dancers to their car after work as part of earning his cut of the tips that they made. Now, investigators, in checking out Speaks after they found this surveillance footage, learned that he was a federal fugitive for failing to register as a sex offender in connection with a 2003 case involving a 14-year-old girl in North Carolina. Speaks also had convictions for assault and domestic violence. On June 12th of 2012, police pulled Speaks and Sanchez over for a routine traffic stop. Speaks had dyed his hair orange, and Sanchez had actually dyed her hair blue. Now, Speaks jumped out of the car at this traffic stop, scaled a fence, and ran into the woods. Police caught him and turned him over to the FBI. They also took Sanchez into custody for harboring a sex offender. A few months after his arrest, Speaks was to stand trial for Jaren Lockhart's murder. Sanchez was also charged with the murder in the Lockhart case, and investigators believed that the suspects had killed Lockhart in Louisiana and dumped her remains in Mississippi. Supposedly, the night that Speaks and Sanchez went to the strip club, they were seeking a stripper for whom they could have a threesome with. And this is according to court testimony, I believe a lot from the prosecution, so I don't know how true that is, but that is what has been said in the court. They found Lockhart, investigators said, a willing participant who left her job with the couple at about 2 a.m. that morning. Now, police in court say that she was stabbed in the back, which was likely the fatal wound. Now, supposedly Lockhart was also dealing with a heroin addiction, and authorities confirmed that opiates were found in her body during the time of the autopsy. Now, whether she took those willingly or was given them is unknown. Investigators said that Lockhart's phone was turned off before reaching Kenner, which they believe was where the murder took place, leaving them unable to use her mobile signal to track her movements that night. Now, they believe that she was killed in Kenner and have focused their investigation on a Connecticut Avenue house that belonged to a member of Sanchez's family, where she and Speaks lived at the time. At about 9:30 p.m. on June 6th of 2012, about 22 hours after Lockhart walked out of Temptations with Speaks and Sanchez, a license plate camera on Interstate 10 picked up Sanchez's car crossing the Mississippi line. The car was picked up re-entering Louisiana on I-10 about an hour and a half later. They suspect that's when Lockhart's body was discarded in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, in June of 2015, a jury in Jefferson Parish court found Terry Speaks guilty of second-degree murder. The defendant had fired his attorneys and decided to represent himself. He was sentenced to life in prison for this crime. On June 20th of 2016, Margaret Sanchez pleaded guilty to manslaughter and obstruction of justice in the Lockhart killing. The judge sentenced her to 40 years in prison. Now, because Terry Speaks never confessed and Sanchez didn't go to trial, the motive behind the killing and dismemberment is still unknown to this day. However, there obviously is a lot of speculation as to why. Now, some people have noted that Lockhart and Sanchez were at completely opposite ends of a personality spectrum, basically. Sanchez could be socially awkward and overly eccentric in the way that she dressed, whereas Lockhart, on the other hand, was basically someone you just wanted to be around. Everybody loved Jaren, and she was this small bundle of happy energy. And supposedly Margaret was a very jealous person. She was very attention-seeking, and Jaren naturally got a lot of attention. And in connection with the murder of Addie Hall, prior to the death of Jaren Lockhart, director Rob Florence decided to make a film after a chance meeting with Margaret Sanchez about Zack and Addie. Now, Sanchez was friends with the couple, and Florence says that he decided to make the documentary after hearing Sanchez talk about how the couple's death had continued to affect her life. Sanchez agreed to be interviewed for the project, and she talks about her shock after learning the deaths of her friend and her nightmares that followed. So if you watch the documentaries, Zack and Addie, and you also watch ABC's Final Witness on the murders, Margaret Sanchez is one of the main people they interview throughout these. She's describing in the documentaries how her very best friends, Zack Bowen and Addie Hall, fell in love in the desperate early days after Hurricane Katrina. The director, Rob Florence, says that when he found out about Margaret Sanchez murdering Jaren Lockhart, he was completely blown away. It's worth noting that when Zack killed Addie, he murdered her and dismembered her, and then Margaret Sanchez sort of went and did the same thing to someone else. And she talks during the documentaries about how the killing really haunted her for years to come. And this murder is 6 years after what happened with Zack and Addie. So you have to wonder where she was driven mentally because of those deaths, how much she fixated on it. Surely there was probably some drug use that exacerbated these, constant nightmares and images in her head of what must have happened between her friends, and something led her to snap and do basically the exact same thing. This was very interesting, and I really appreciate the request for this because I watched the Zack and Addie documentaries, and of course at the time they didn't know what was going to happen with Margaret Sanchez, so there's no note of, hey, by the way, this woman ends up doing the same thing. So I watched the whole thing just feeling so bad for this woman, and didn't even know that by the time I had watched it, she had done the exact same thing. So yes, thank you so much for this request. I really liked doing this, and being able to read some of the police report on this as well was really interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button below. If you have any requests, true crime or otherwise, please leave those in the comments below. If you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. I upload new videos every Wednesday, and otherwise, I will see you guys next week.